Welcome to the channel's book club. Thank you for joining us. People often ask what they can do to read more. Well, today's episode may prove helpful in that regard. One of those that made our top books of 2014 list is this one titled How to Read More by Martin Udogie. It's a fascinating book that has been inspiring people to read more. We met with Martin Udogie at Oakwood Hotel, Lekki, Lagos, and asked him to share with us tips from his book that can help anyone develop a better reading habit. You may need a notebook and a pen for this. Enjoy it.
Kule, thank you very much for having me back on your show. but before I go to the tips, let me say something a bit more fundamental. I think knowledge, what we know, is what really defines our abilities and skills and competencies, okay? And it's been established that the bulk of what we know comes from what we learn outside of formal classroom education. Okay, so the formula really is that we go to school to learn how to read. Okay, to learn how to read. That's why we go to school. But when we leave school, we have to reverse that equation. So we begin to read to learn. We begin to read to learn. And so reading books, reading materials begins to, improve our abilities, okay? So that is fundamental. People need to understand that, the more they read, the more they know, and therefore the more they can do. But reading doesn't just come natural to people, okay? It has to be a habit that you cultivate, that you develop. So if you find people who read a lot, avid readers, people who are voracious in reading, it didn't just happen overnight. It's like learning to exercise. It comes over time. But once you develop that habit, a whole new world of, learning, knowledge and fun and excitement is opened up, to you. So the question therefore becomes, how do you develop the habit? So the first tip from my book, How to Read More, and this is based on my own experience and also based on research, okay, is to choose a book, okay, that aligns with your interests. So you have interests, you have a passion, you have even hobbies, okay? So when you choose a book that reflects your interests, it becomes easy to read that book because it's just a natural extension of what you already love doing. So that way it's no longer difficult, it's no longer tedious because it's, the book is communicating something that you already enjoy. So let me give you an example. So if you like, or you are somebody who is interested in warfare, you can read about World War I, you can read about World War II, you can read about Nigerian Civil War, you can read about, Operation Desert Storm. Mm-hmm. And not just about the books, you can read about the key actors, the generals,
So the first tip is choose a book that reflects your interests. Okay, let's go to the second tip.
Okay, second tip is that you should read in little chunks of time. In my book, there's a chapter where I spoke about ideally how long it should take you to read, even a page. So let's say, for instance, you spend 3 to 5 minutes reading a page, okay, of a book. In about 15 minutes, okay, you can read between, 3 to 5 pages. And if you extend that over an hour, you're probably reading between 12 to 20 pages. So somebody who reads 20 pages in 1 hour, if it's a 200-page book, you can complete that book in 10 hours, okay? Now, but I will not advise you to spend 1 hour at a stretch sitting down reading a book. No, that's study, that's intense. That's what you do in a classroom setting. You're never going to enjoy that literature or that book. But if you read, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, so if that 1 hour you stretch it over a day, then it becomes easier because then it's not tedious, you are enjoying it, you are having fun. Okay, so I think that's the second tip. So read in chunks, little chunks of time spread over a period.
That makes it a lot easier for people to be able to read rather than reading for long stretches of time. That's good. Okay, let's go to the third tip now.
So my third tip would be find a conducive time and venue for reading. Find a conducive time and venue for reading, because people are different. You see, Kunle, reading is what they call a cognitive activity. What that means is that it deals with the brain. You are working with your brain. And for every individual, there's a time and a place that is conducive to your reading. So if you read my book, for instance, and this has taken me over time, and again, the way to establish that balance is to keep experimenting. So you can go to maybe a hotel setting, you can go to a poolside. There are people who love reading, in the beaches. There are people who like a quiet environment. In my case, for instance, I love reading where there's some kind of background noise, background music, because that helps me to concentrate better. I understand myself to the extent that I know what kind of dressing suits my reading. I will not read in a blue shirt or a colored shirt, but in a white short sleeve. So you have to understand. That's what your brain is very sensitive. And I think it's also important that families should also work with their children to also create what you call a conducive environment that will enable the children actually enjoy reading. What you find these days sometimes is that, go read your book. Is given as an instruction, like something punitive. So the child sees it as a chore. He's not going to enjoy. Of course, if you are reading for an exam or you are trying to pass, the child is trying to read for an assignment. Yes, you might need that kind of control. But beyond that, it's also important to find a time and a place and an environment that will just make children naturally just enjoy that activity called reading.